Welcome to Proverbs chapter 3. This is going to be our first step into our journey through this chapter. So this is an excellent place to start if you have not been with us up to this point. But if you haven't, I do still encourage you to take a look at our series that we've gone through chapters 1 and 2. We found in chapters 1 and 2 that the themes that are developing in Proverbs integrate wonderfully with one another, and the chapters build upon one another, even if they don't directly relate to the others. So if you want the most out of chapter 3, I think that will happen if you kind of go on a journey from the beginning to get here with us and see why we're talking about the things we're talking about and how we got here and the kinds of images we're honing in on. But if you don't want to do that, I understand, and it's still going to be a great time starting from this point. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Proverbs 3. My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life, and peace they will add to you. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh, and refreshment to your bones. If you have some familiarity with the Bible, these are some pretty famous verses. People quote this section all the time. Because it's very happy in many ways, right? It's this powerful command, let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you, bind them around your neck, so you will find favor and good success. Then this is a very classic verse. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. These are probably some of the most embroidered verses in the whole Bible. But we're going to want to take some time together to really dig in and understand, these verses sound great, but what is the treasure behind, right? The process that we discussed in chapter 2, we're living out, and we're going to continue to live out as we prepare our hearts and seek like treasure, seek like silver in a mine what lies within the Proverbs, the beautiful wisdom and knowledge that lies within the Proverbs. And we'll start, as always, from the beginning here. My son, right? We've come back to that very personal address. My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. Do not forget. Let your heart keep my commandments. That do not forget and keep. Those are the words that stand out to me. For length of days and years of life, and peace they will add to you. All right, so we kind of have 2 to 3 sections, maybe depending on how you divide it. We have the command, do not forget my teaching. So a negative command, but let your heart keep my commandments, positive command, for length of days and years of life. This is like a qualifier, and peace they will add to you, the result. So I guess I can go ahead and label these for us. We have a negative command, a positive command, a qualifier. I'm not sure that's the best word for that, and the result or the end. Okay. And then it looks like we're going to continue to get more commands. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So we're going to need to get into all that. But let's stick with verses 1 and 2 here for a minute. My son. So we've talked quite a bit about the address of my son. So if you're interested in that, I would definitely suggest looking back through the series and finding the videos that would correspond to the proper verses in that. Right, there's a section in chapter 1 in particular that I think we spent a lot of time on that. That's kind of the second section after the introduction. So if you're interested in that, be sure to go back and look there. But we have this personal address. Do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments for length of days and years of life. Why do not forget? He could have said a lot of things, right? There's a lot of things you shouldn't do. But his first emphasis, for this chapter at least, is do not forget my teaching. Why? Because if you forget, you don't have it, right? Because forgetting equals losing, right? This is the power of memory. And why memory is so important, why remembering is so important. Remembering is a command that appears all throughout the Bible in all kinds of contexts. And it's perhaps then not surprising that in this place, when we've spent much of chapters 1 and 2 talking about how you're going to come to understanding, what kind of person you're going to become in order to understand, where you're going to receive it from, and then so in general terms, some of the knowledge you're going to get. And then we start in this next section. Yeah, so all that work that you put in, don't forget. All those gifts God gave you, don't forget. Because if you forget it, you will lose it. And losing it means it was all for nothing. If you lose it, it was all for nothing. Right? Remembering and keeping, right? This positive command. We could ask ourselves, why keep? Because keeping and remembering are intimately linked. Oh, that was a little strange. Apologies for technical difficulties. Because keeping and remembering are intimately linked. And in fact, let's just check real quick in Proverbs 1. To know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing. Maybe I'm misremembering. For some reason, I thought this was maybe not the first command of keeping. Oh, okay. This is probably where the connection my mind was making. The treasuring, right? If you receive my words, treasure them up, right? Keep them close. Hold on to them. Remember them. So that was chapter 2, verse 2. You see how, if you haven't seen some of these other parts of the journey, we're going to continue to draw on these things because they're all developing this similar beautiful theme and various themes. But I'm going to go ahead and remind us of Proverbs 2, verse 2, right? That idea of treasuring these commandments. Let your heart keep my commandments, a positive command. And it is kind of just interesting that he transitions from negative to positive because human beings actually remember and act on positive commands better than negative commands. And so when you tell someone to do something versus not to do something, they're actually more likely to remember it. Isn't that funny? So as he's saying, hey, don't forget, he then goes on to say, yeah, remember. So he's covering his bases, right? Keep my commandments. Now, okay, we've put keep in a particular context, but there's another way, right, to think of this word keep, right, which is act on my commandments, right? Keep as in do them. Keep my commandments. You don't just want them in the vault of your heart where you never look at them and you keep them safe, but you sure never meditate on them or get them out and use them, right? Because they're far too valuable. No, that's not the kind of value that these have. When he says keep, you have to remember, but the remembering enables the action of keeping. So you want to act on these commandments and act on the teaching, and the forgetting enables, or the remembering rather, enables the action, which is another incredibly important point, and how these two parts of the verse mirror each other. And man, this is not the first time we've seen this dual-sided coin where one part of the verse reflects and builds upon the other, either for a positive or a negative reason. And in this case, of course, it's positive, that this remembering enables the keeping. Do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. And so how beautiful is that? So don't forget my teaching. Positive version of that is remember my teaching. And so there's something to do with the mind. And we talked about this in Proverbs 1, where there's things you don't know, and then you come to know them. And once you come to know them, right, now you can actually begin to work through the process of understanding. But if you don't know them at all, you can't work to understand them. And so this is how wisdom works. There are things you don't know that get introduced to you, and then you know them. But now that doesn't mean anything has changed about your life. You may not even understand them. So now you begin to understand them. And by working through the process of understanding them, you then see transformation in your heart, and you begin to keep them. You begin to do these things and then pour out. This is just exactly what we were talking about. And I'll just show you the image. Exactly what we were talking about in chapter 1, where knowledge is given, character change takes place through understanding, through wrestling, and then it overflows in a kind of new life. So amazing callbacks to those images are going on right now. And so the remembering, just as the knowledge is the first step, remembering over the course of time is how you maintain the first step and don't have to take it again and again and again and again and again, etc. Right? And which, again, works beautifully, perfectly, amazingly. It's almost like, some divine author wrote this book, isn't it? Because how incredible is it that the qualifier we talked about for length of days and years of life. So we've been talking about beginning a process, of starting this change. But now we're talking about something else, right? Now we're talking about the whole thing. So what does this imply? Would be a great question to ask. And I'm sorry, sometimes I'm not always starting with the question and I'm kind of going, it looks like I'm finding an answer and then asking a question to get that answer. But you'll find that as you become more adept at asking these questions and making connections, that you'll sort of intuitively skip the question in your mind and just make the connection. But I just want to demonstrate that there are questions you could ask that would begin to unveil these sorts of connections. So I'm not trying to build out something in the reverse necessarily. I just want you to know that sometimes we'll go from it forwards, where you find the question and then we work out the answer and find connections. But sometimes connections make themselves known, and we work backwards to realize, oh, you see, this kind of question would have led to this sort of thing. Okay. So what does this imply? That we've moved on from the beginning of a process to the living of it. So we're not just getting started, not just getting our feet under us now. Now we're talking about what it will look like for length of days and years of life. And in order for that to happen, in order for your knowledge to remain as the bedrock of this process, you must remember it. Remember, because knowledge is a zero-sum game. You know it, you have it, or you don't have it. And remembering means you continue to win the game, quote unquote, in a certain way, right? In this context. So you've moved from beginning the process to living the process, and remembering enables the keeping. And I'm just going to connect these for us because these are so intertwined. And peace they will add to you. And this, of course, is the result of living out this process, is peace will be added to your life. Now we could say, okay, well, why will peace be added to me of this scenario of don't forget my teaching, let your heart keep my commandments for length of days and years of life? Well, because by letting your heart keep the commandments, by continuing to remember and hold on to and treasure the knowledge and the teaching, your heart is being transformed. And it's becoming progressively a new creation. And the longer that happens, the more like wisdom, the more wise your heart will be. And the more wisdom you have, the more peace you will have. The teaching and the commandments will become treasures, will become peaceful to you, because as you wrestle with them, they will, in some ways, become comforting. Even if you don't ever stop really quite wrestling with them, the wrestling becomes something that you become comfortable with doing. And it's good because it's this process of transforming your character, and the transforming of your character is something you know that is good. And so then this sort of knowledge begins to bring peace to the process, and then the process becomes peaceful. But that only happens. The key here is actually, let me draw a key to unlock what's going on here, which is the length, the time, the years. This is not a snap of the fingers. This is the living out of an entire life of genuine transformation. And you can see that even as we continue to look at the next verses, which we probably don't have time for, but I do want to point out, right, that we talk about steadfast love, faithfulness, binding, write them on the tablet. These are ideas of permanence. And so as the remembering, the commandments, the teachings become permanent in your life, the transformation of your heart is enabled to keep those commandments because they are held close, because they are treasured, because they are remembered, and in keeping them is transformed, and in being transformed becomes ever more at peace. So it's perhaps something like the foundation of knowledge, the foundation of teaching, of the wise teachings, allows for the heart to keep the teachings. We'll call this the commandments. I've run out of room here. Let me see if I can make this a little easier on us. And as your heart keeps the commandments, right, it is transformed. It's like that as the water, which flows up from the knowledge and allows your heart to keep it. I'm sorry, that was the wrong color. Allows your heart to keep it. It's like it becomes a different thing, right? That it starts to change color. It starts to become something different. And that thing is peace, right? The thing that starts to change is that this process is no longer like the jets of a fountain, which can be disruptive and foamy, right? But you begin to see this sort of disruption, this process, this flow as something which is peaceful, the way, in fact, that we view fountains, right? That we don't view them as just violent eruptions of water. We view them as something calming, as peaceful, as beautiful. And that's what we're looking for here, right? It's the commandments in the heart, as they're kept, are transformed into something more, something other than just this container, something other than just this jet or this foundation of knowledge, but are all combined into a wise life that endures through time. So you could really think about this almost more like a spring, maybe a fountain, right? But a spring which comes forth from the earth and over time carves out for itself great, deep, beautiful pools of water, right? And it continues to be filled and provide sustenance to the life which surrounds it, and maybe grows bigger as it erodes the soil around it, but then creates just something ever more rich and deep, like a crystal clear mountain stream thing. So whatever images sort of bring peace to your heart, whether that's the fountain or the spring, I think either one of these is a great way to think about it. And this seems like an excellent time to go through a review. So we noticed right off the first, right, that this is once again a very personal greeting, and we had to figure out, why is he focusing on forgetting? And we realized that because forgetting is the same as losing. And if you lose what has been taught, then the process, the work, the effort, even the transformation that occurred for you to be changed in order to receive this knowledge, it was all for nothing. But then we made the connection that the remembering and the keeping are essentially the same, that the remembering in fact enables the keeping, because remembering knowledge is a zero-sum game. You have it or you don't, and if you don't have it, you can't work through it. It can't enable your actions. And so as you keep these commandments, as your heart keeps them over the course of time. And the length of time is the key to this equation, because we're no longer talking about getting our feet under us and starting at the beginning. We're talking about a life well lived, a life lived as a wise person. And that kind of life is one of permanence, based, right, on the foundation of this teaching and this knowledge, but it's one where the commandments of God well up and are contained by the heart. But the heart is itself transformed, and no longer are these two things just separate entities that, kind of knock against one another, but are transformed into something that is peaceful. It is something greater than the sum of its parts, like a spring, like a fountain. It's a wise life that endures through time, that adds this peace that overflows and can be enjoyed by the person themselves, but also by those people who are in their life. Beautiful. What an excellent beginning to this chapter, and I very much look forward to digging deeper into the next set of verses. See you in the next video.